What happened when an undercover CEO watched a parking attendant give a sticker to a deaf boy and decided to change his entire company because of it? You're about to find out. Welcome, wonderful listeners. You have an incredible eye for stories that go deeper than appearances. Today's tale is not about parking spaces. It's about human connection, quiet redemption, and the power of one small act of kindness to transform lives. If you believe in second chances, unseen heroes, and the beauty of compassion, this story will stay with you long after the final moment. Let's step into the light. Underground. Noah Reyes had grown used to being invisible. In his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a posture shaped by years of quiet endurance, he manned the booth on level 3 of the Midtown parking garage like a lighthouse keeper, watching over gray tides of commuters. The world passed him by in steel and exhaust, barely noticing the man behind the glass. And Noah preferred it that way. He'd once been a high school counselor, respected and purposeful, but after a tragedy involving a student he couldn't save, he stepped away from the career that had defined him. Now the soft ding of ticket machines and the whir of automatic gates replaced the echo of teenage voices and locker slams. He wore a navy windbreaker, always zipped halfway, and kept his small booth tidy, stocked with breath mints, a battered thermos, and a box of smiley face stickers. It was a small habit he hadn't shaken, giving kids a sticker when they passed through with their parents. No one had asked him to do it. No one noticed when he did. But it gave him a reason to feel useful, even in the smallest way. The garage itself was a world apart. Concrete columns, low fluorescent lights, and the ever-present smell of oil and damp pavement. The city pulsed above, unaware of the quiet humanity tucked beneath its feet. Noah knew the regulars, the surgeon in scrubs always 5 minutes late, the barista who sang under her breath and greeted each one with a nod or a smile. He didn't ask questions. He didn't pry, but he noticed everything. On a gray Thursday afternoon, rain streaking the entrance ramp like veins, Noah leaned back in his chair, sipping lukewarm coffee, when headlights cut through the gloom. A battered sedan coasted to a stop, and a tall man stepped out, opening the back door to help a small boy out. The boy clutched his hand tightly, hesitant, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar garage. There was something in the way the child moved, careful, uncertain, that made Noah sit up a little straighter. He didn't know it yet, but this moment, this quiet arrival in a place no one looks twice at, would change everything, not just for him, but for the boy, for the man, and for a city that had forgotten where its light could come from. The boy's hesitation was immediate and unmistakable. As the man gently led him forward, the child clung to his hand with a quiet, wide-eyed caution. Noah watched from his booth, his senses sharpened, not out of suspicion, but out of that instinct he never fully lost from his years as a counselor. He recognized guardedness in children. This wasn't fear exactly, it was something deeper, like the boy had learned too early to brace himself for misunderstanding. The man approached the payment terminal with practiced motion, but the boy's eyes remained locked on the floor. When Noah leaned forward with a gentle smile and said, "Hey there, little guy," there was no response, not even a glance. Instead, the man knelt and began to communicate with his hands, silent gestures deliberate and fluid. Noah's eyes widened slightly. Sign language. He nodded to himself quietly, already feeling a shift in the moment. The boy, still clinging to his guardian's side, reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded note. Noah stepped out of the booth slowly, crouching to be level with the child, and unfolded the piece of paper. The words were written in large, shaky letters. "Can I have a sticker?" Noah felt something stir in his chest, a pang so gentle it nearly passed as a breath. "Of course," he said softly, reaching into his booth and pulling out the familiar roll. "This one's my favorite," he added, selecting a bright yellow sticker with a winking smiley face. He handed it to the boy with a quiet nod. The boy took it with reverence, then looked up at Noah, just for a second, and smiled. It was fleeting, shy, but radiant, the kind of smile that didn't need a sound to be heard. Noah returned to his seat, watching as the man paid for the ticket and the two turned to go. The boy looked back once more and waved, not with his hand, but with two fingers tapped lightly to his chin, then arcing outwards. A sign. Noah didn't know what it meant, but he raised his hand anyway and waved back. What he didn't notice was the janitor a few yards away, slowly mopping the concrete, head low but eyes keen. Matthew Langford, founder and CEO of Langford Parking Systems, had been working undercover for weeks in his own garages. He had seen countless customers, countless staff, but this quiet exchange between the booth attendant and the deaf boy was different. It wasn't just polite, it was human, and it stayed with him long after the boy disappeared up the ramp and into the rain. Matthew Langford moved the mop in slow, steady strokes, his movements deliberate, but mostly for show. His knees ached and his back complained, but he welcomed the discomfort. It grounded him, reminded him why he was here. Most people, including his own executive team, would have called him foolish for this undercover stint. After all, he was the founder and CEO of Langford Parking Systems, a multi-state enterprise with automated systems, digital kiosks, and shareholder meetings. But none of those things made him feel human anymore. Not since his wife passed 2 years ago. Not since his only daughter stopped returning his calls. He had built an empire by paving over silence, converting forgotten spaces into polished, revenue-generating garages. Yet somewhere along the way, he'd paved over himself, too. This wasn't the first garage he'd disguised himself in, but it was the one that mattered. Midtown Level 3 had been his very first location. Back then, he knew every attendant by name, shook hands with every tenant, and ran a broom himself when needed. He'd built the business on values, reliability, fairness, trust. But the larger things got, the further he drifted from those roots. The more he relied on data and dashboards, the more the real world blurred, until he found himself one evening, standing in his empty penthouse, staring at a framed photo of his wife beside a congratulatory plaque, wondering why neither made him feel proud anymore. So he returned to where it all began, and it was here, among the oil stains and buzzing fluorescence, that he witnessed something more valuable than his quarterly reports could ever reveal. He had seen how Noah, the booth attendant, connected with that little boy. Not out of obligation or customer service, but with genuine warmth. No hesitation, no pity, just kindness. The boy's deafness hadn't fazed Noah. If anything, it made him lean in closer, speak softer, move slower. It was the type of grace Matthew hadn't seen in years, certainly not in boardrooms or investor calls. As the child and his guardian disappeared into the rain, Matthew stood still, mop in hand, staring at the booth. He felt something stir, not unlike grief, but gentler. Regret. Regret that he hadn't stepped in sooner, that it had taken him so long to come back, that he'd forgotten how powerful one unspoken moment of empathy could be. Maybe he couldn't fix everything, not with his daughter, not with the company, but maybe, just maybe, he could still make room for light in the places everyone else forgot to look, especially underground. The next Tuesday, as Noah wiped down the inside of his booth and watched the afternoon traffic thin, he heard the familiar whine of tires descending the ramp. His heart stirred with quiet curiosity when he saw the same battered sedan from last week roll into view. The tall man, Darren, stepped out once again, his expression weary but softer this time. From the passenger side, the little boy emerged more steadily, no longer clinging as tightly to his guardian's hand. Eli's eyes searched the garage until they found Noah, and a small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. Something about that recognition made Noah's chest tighten, not in pain, but in quiet awe. He stepped out of the booth before they reached it, crouching slightly in greeting. "Hey there," he said gently, unsure if Eli could read his lips, but saying it anyway. Eli reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Darren gave a nod of encouragement, and the boy stepped forward, offering it with both hands. Noah took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, bright crayon lines on wrinkled white. In the picture, a boxy version of Noah stood behind a booth with a cartoonishly large smiley face sticker in his hand. Above the booth, glowing down from the ceiling, was a giant yellow light bulb, radiant and exaggerated like the sun. Noah's name was written in blocky capital letters across the top. He blinked and let out a slow breath. "This is incredible," he said, genuinely moved. "You made this?" Eli nodded vigorously. Noah looked to Darren, who offered a small, proud smile. "He wanted to come back," he said simply. "He talked about the sticker all week." Noah crouched lower, bringing himself to Eli's level. "Can I show you something too?" he asked. Then mimed a basic sign he had looked up that morning. His attempt at thank you. It was clumsy and slow, but he tried. Eli's eyes widened. He smiled, not shyly, not cautiously, but brightly. From his usual sweeping route by the stairwell, Matthew Langford paused mid-mop. He saw the exchange, the drawing, the sign, the boy's delight, and knew without question that this wasn't an ordinary interaction. This was what his garages were supposed to be about: spaces of safety, spaces of light, spaces where someone could feel seen. And it was all being built quietly, beautifully, by a man behind a plexiglass window and a child with a handful of crayons. The following week brought a new face to Level 3, one that didn't fit the usual profile of hurried drivers and lunch-hour commuters. She arrived mid-morning, her heels clicking sharply on the concrete, a leather satchel slung neatly over one shoulder. Tall, composed, and clearly purposeful, she walked straight past the kiosks and up to Noah's booth. "Excuse me," she said through the open window, offering a kind smile. "Are you the attendant who was here last Tuesday?" Noah, caught off guard, nodded slowly. "I am. Can I help you?" She extended a business card across the counter. "Dr. Camilla Shore, Director, Horizon Voices Foundation." "I believe you met a young boy named Eli," she said. "He hasn't stopped talking about the man with the booth and the sticker." Noah chuckled softly, his posture relaxing. "He left me a drawing. One of the best things I've gotten in years." Camilla's smile widened. "Ha, I'm not surprised. Eli doesn't usually connect with people that quickly. He's bright but guarded. Since his parents passed, he's lived with his uncle, Darren. It's been a tough adjustment, but when he finds someone who makes him feel safe, he remembers, and he wanted you to be part of something." Noah raised an eyebrow, curious. "Something?" Camilla explained that Horizon Voices was preparing a public storytelling exhibit featuring art and writings from children with disabilities. Eli had been working on a personal collection and insisted that his garage experience be included. "He drew you," she said, "several times. You're his light in the gray place, his words." For a moment, Noah was quiet. He looked down at his hands, calloused from years of holding steering tickets and hot coffee cups, and felt the weight of her words settle over him. "I don't know if I belong in something like that," he said carefully. "I'm just a guy doing his shift in a parking booth." Camilla tilted her head. "That's exactly why you belong. People like you, quiet, steady, kind, are the reason kids like Eli find courage to share their world. We'd love to include your side of the story too. A few words, maybe a picture. Nothing fancy." Noah gave a slow nod, visibly moved. "If it helps Eli, I'm in." From his station near the exit, Matthew Langford overheard just enough of the exchange to understand something big was taking root. A boy, a booth attendant, and now a nonprofit advocate. 3 threads weaving into a single story. One he was no longer willing to watch from the shadows. 3 days later, Noah received an unexpected call over the intercom. "Report to the manager's office on level 1. Confused, he assumed it was a shift mix-up or a new protocol update, but when he stepped into the small, underused office tucked behind a supply closet, he found Camilla, Darren, and even Eli already there. seated quietly around a folding table, and across from them, no longer in a janitor's uniform, but in a sharp navy blazer, stood Matthew Langford. Noah blinked, recognizing him instantly, and yet not at all. Gone was the mop, the hunched posture, the unassuming demeanor. In its place stood a man with the presence of someone used to command, yet somehow still humble. "Sorry to surprise you," Matthew began, gesturing for Noah to sit. "I figured it was time I told you who I really am." The room was still. Camilla offered a knowing smile. Darren looked puzzled. Eli clutched his notebook. "I'm Matthew Langford," he continued. "I own this garage, and about 120 others across the region." Noah's mouth opened, then closed again. "You're the janitor?" Matthew smiled. "Not exactly. I've been working undercover for a while now, trying to reconnect with what this business used to be, the people, the values. Somewhere along the way I lost that, but I've been watching Weston quietly, and I saw something in you, Noah, something I haven't seen in a long time." Noah shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. "I'm just a guy doing his job." "No," Matthew said firmly. "You're a man who saw a child in silence and didn't flinch, who gave without being asked, who made a concrete garage feel like home, for a boy who needed it more than anyone realized." He turned to the table, laid down a folder, and opened it to a series of plans, drawings, notes. A bold title across the front, Garage Light. "It's a community initiative," Matthew explained. "We'll start right here, transforming garages into more than just places to park. They'll host art from children like Eli, quiet zones, resource kiosks, weekend family events. A portion of company profits will fund scholarships, mentorships, and support programs." Camilla's eyes lit up. Darren leaned in. "And I want you, Noah," Matthew continued, "to lead it." Noah froze. "Me? I'm not a leader. I fix ticket machines and hand out stickers." Matthew's voice softened. "Exactly. And that's why you're perfect. You already built something out of nothing. A human connection, a moment of light. Now imagine what you could build if we gave that moment room to grow." Noah looked at Eli, who gave him a small, earnest thumbs up. He didn't say yes, not yet, but for the first time in years, he didn't say no either. That night, Noah sat alone on the weather-worn bench just outside the old community chapel 2 blocks from his apartment. It was a place he used to visit often back when his son was young, back when he still believed he had something important to offer the world. The late autumn air bit at his cheeks, but he didn't mind. He needed the quiet. His hands, still rough from years of manual work, rested on his knees as his mind turned over Matthew's words. Lead the program, it sounded like something meant for someone else, someone polished, experienced, respected, not for a man whose greatest recent achievement was organizing the booth's lost and found drawer by color. He stared up at the streetlight above, haloed with mist, and tried to remember the last time he had truly felt sure of himself. Maybe it was before the student tragedy that ended his counseling career, a boy who came to his office every week, quietly begging for help in ways Noah only understood too late. That loss had hollowed something inside him, something he had never quite found the courage to rebuild. He'd buried his self-worth beneath shift work and solitude, thinking that being good enough wasn't something he deserved anymore. Now a CEO was asking him to lead a movement. The voices in his head offered all the usual doubts. You're not qualified. You're not ready. You'll let them down. But then another voice, softer and truer, spoke up. Eli doesn't think that. Neither does Darren, or Camilla, or Matthew. They saw something, and maybe it's time you tried to see it too. He pulled Eli's drawing from his coat pocket, unfolding the crinkled paper carefully. The booth. The light. His name in big wobbly letters. A child's way of saying, you mattered. Noah looked back at the chapel door, then down the sidewalk toward his apartment. He stood up slowly, the weight of the decision still heavy, but no longer paralyzing. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could help shape something now. Something new. Tomorrow, he will give Matthew his answer. Noah returned to the garage the next morning with a quiet resolve he hadn't felt in years. He walked past his booth, past the turnstiles, and straight into the operations office where Matthew and Camilla were reviewing early designs. "I'm in," he said simply. Matthew looked up, surprised, but only for a second. Then he smiled, wide and genuine, like a man who had just watched something bloom in winter. From that day forward, the Midtown Level 3 garage slowly transformed into something new, something almost no one expected from a space built of concrete and silence. Under Noah's leadership, Garage Light became more than a name. It became a living, breathing effort to create warmth underground. The first changes were small, a mural wall painted by local teens, including Eli, who visited each week after school with Darren. Eli's drawings of stickers, smiling booths, and radiant bulbs became the visual heart of the space. Then came the resource kiosk, staffed on weekends by volunteers from Horizon Voices Foundation, offering everything from translation help to pamphlets for families with special needs. Noah worked tirelessly, balancing the initiative with his regular shift, arriving early and staying late, often rearranging pamphlets or helping artists tape up new posters before sunrise. Camilla brought in her nonprofit's network to offer weekend sign language workshops. Noah made sure to attend every one, sitting in the front, fumbling his fingers through each lesson with quiet determination. His goal wasn't fluency, it was connection. Every time Eli smiled when Noah got a sign right, it felt like a small miracle. Matthew, meanwhile, shed his title more often than not, opting for rolled-up sleeves and paint-stained hands. He began mentoring teens who volunteered, telling stories about how this garage was his first, and why it mattered so deeply to make it a place people wanted to be, not just pass through. Darren, once reserved and burdened, stepped in to help with planning logistics, sharing ideas from his own experience as a working guardian. For the first time in years, he felt part of something bigger than survival. The concrete walls didn't change much, but the energy did. There were now bulletin boards covered in community artwork, a reading nook lit with soft lamps, and music, yes, soft music echoing gently through the space. Noah looked around one evening as the day's event wrapped up, volunteers folding chairs and laughing in the distance, and he felt something deeper than pride. He felt purpose, the kind that doesn't shout or sparkle, the kind that simply shines quietly exactly where it's needed most. Launch night arrived beneath a sky streaked with violet dusk, and for the first time in decades, Level 3 of the Midtown Garage was buzzing with life. Not from engines, but from people. Strings of warm cafe lights crisscrossed between the concrete pillars, casting a soft glow over rows of folding chairs, booths decorated with local artwork, and tables piled high with baked goods donated by neighborhood cafes. The air held a subtle trace of lavender and citrus, a far cry from its usual tang of oil and damp pavement. Noah stood near the mural wall, heart pounding, adjusting his collar as he watched guests trickle in, parents with kids, city workers, a few journalists, and some curious commuters who had followed the buzz. Eli arrived with Darren and Camilla just before 6 p.m., clutching a small folder to his chest. His sunflower drawing, newly framed, hung at the front of the display, positioned under the first Garage Light sign ever printed. It had become the symbol of the entire initiative. Eli's eyes lit up when he saw Noah, and he rushed forward to give a big wave, signing thank you with practiced precision. Noah grinned and signed it back. They didn't need words anymore. Their language had already been written in every gesture, every sticker, every quiet moment that led to this. As the crowd settled, Camilla took the mic first, welcoming everyone. Then, to Noah's astonishment, Darren stepped up. He hadn't planned to speak, but as he stood there with Eli's hand in his, he found the strength. "When I took in my nephew, I was terrified," he began, voice wavering. "I was working nights, barely scraping by. I didn't know how to raise a child who lived in silence when I had none of the tools. But then we found a parking booth, and a man who didn't look away. His voice cracked, but he continued. Noah didn't just see Eli. He saw us both, and that changed everything. The room filled with stillness and then soft applause. Noah stepped up next, nervous but steady. I thought I left my purpose behind when I walked away from teaching, he said. But it turns out purpose doesn't leave you. It waits. And sometimes it finds you in quiet places, like a garage. Matthew stood at the back, hands clasped, pride radiating from his otherwise quiet stance. He didn't need to speak tonight. This was Noah's night, Eli's night. The garage's rebirth. As music began and families wandered through the art-lined aisles, Noah stood beside Eli, who held up a new drawing. This time, of people standing under lights. And Noah knew. They had built something that mattered. Months passed, and Garage Light became more than just a program. It became a movement. What began on level 3 spread to 5 other garages across the city, then beyond. Community artwork bloomed under overpasses, families gathered for weekend events, and children like Eli found not only visibility, but joy. Noah, once a man content to disappear behind plexiglass and routine, had become a quiet figure of inspiration. But even as the praise grew, he remained humble, still the first to arrive and the last to leave, still pocketing extra stickers just in case. One crisp morning, while sorting through the center's mailbox, Noah found a plain envelope addressed only to him. No return address. Just his name written in sharp, deliberate handwriting. Inside was a letter, and as he read the first line, he froze. It had been nearly 5 years since he'd heard from his son. Noah's eyes blurred as he continued reading. I saw your name on the news, saw what you built. I never understood why you left the school. I thought you gave up. But now I see you just found a new way to help people. And it's beautiful. I'm proud of you. Maybe it's time we talk again. The letter was short, but it felt like a bridge Noah had stopped hoping for, suddenly laid brick by brick with unexpected grace. He folded it carefully, tucked it into his coat, and stared out at the garage's lower level, where Eli's newest mural was being painted, this one filled with color and motion and figures that danced in the light. Later that day, Matthew approached him with an idea, a mentorship program pairing retired workers with kids needing guidance. Noah smiled and nodded. Let's do it. Legacy, Noah realized, wasn't always built in loud, linear ways. Sometimes it bloomed underground, in the spaces everyone else forgot. And sometimes the most lasting impact came not from changing the world all at once, but from seeing just one person, clearly and fully, and offering them light. And in that garage, beneath the city's hum, they had done just that. Together, the story of Garage Light reminds us that true impact doesn't always come from grand gestures. It often begins with a small, quiet act of kindness. When Noah, a humble parking attendant, chose to treat a scared, deaf child with dignity and warmth, he had no idea that a simple gesture would ripple outward to change lives, reconnect families, and spark a movement of hope. It's a powerful lesson for all of us, especially in a fast-paced world that often overlooks the quiet helpers. We learn that leadership isn't about titles, it's about character. That healing can start in unlikely places, like a garage, and that redemption is always possible, even for those who feel forgotten by their past. This story also reminds us that legacies are not built through perfection, but through connection. When people come together with compassion, courage, and humility, even the most ordinary places can become sacred ground. Whether you're a CEO, a teacher, a parent, or someone just trying to do the right thing, your actions matter. Let Noah's journey be a reminder. You don't need a stage to be seen. Sometimes, the smallest light in the darkest place becomes the one others follow home.